Word association games, something that hasn't been popular since the late 80s, early 90s, but we here at Talk of the Trinity Towers love them. You say Mings, I say leader. You say Jacob Ramsey, I say future. You say Buendia or Coutinho, and magician is the first word that springs to mind. You say Talk of the Trinity, bog off. Yeah, that's right, bog off. Because if you buy one, you get one free. And we've done exactly that for you on this Everton review episode, as we call upon Aston Villa Ability Counts Captain Conor Sherry, who discusses his return from injury, and also Cayman Villans' very own Russ. So why not sit down, listen, and bog off? This is Talk of the Trinity.
Yourself above the ground until you get lost. You'll never be found, and you can't start again until you break down. Break down.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett. I am joined by Mr. Talk of the Trinity himself, Will Forrest. He has been slaving away on the Twitter page at Talk Trinity and also on our YouTube channel at Talk Trinity, imaginatively titled also. And as a result of, I'd like to say ours, but Will mainly, we now have reached our magical total of 100 YouTube subscribers to the at Talk Trinity channel. So firstly, thank you to everybody for subscribing and watching the videos and interacting with us. It's much appreciated. It's one small step towards our plan for global domination, or at least in and around Birmingham anyway. But here in Birmingham, in the midst of January, cold, dark, summer seems a long way away. So what better time to bring a bit of sunshine into our lives? And I'm not just talking about the shirt. I'm talking about the location of our Cayman Islands supervillain, Russell. You will also recognize, his face and also his dulcet tones if you're listening on our podcast providers from the transfer window first leg special. Sequel fans are going to love the second part that we got coming up in the next couple of weeks. So Russell will be back for that, along with all the other contributors. And also joining us this evening is a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Aston Villa himself, Captain Extraordinaire, Conor Sherry. So thank you, Captain, for joining us again today and also joining us for the transfer window first leg special. And if we don't let you out the Zoom call, you'll be back for the second leg of the transfer window special. So thank you very much both to Russell and Conor for joining us for this edition. And because we're going to start with some good news to discuss, I'm just going to get straight into it. The first win of 2022 for Aston Villa, which sounds a bit odd saying that actually, but my fact finders tell me it's true. That at Goodison Park, Saturday afternoon, in front of the BT cameras that don't quite have the same ring to it as Sky, but TV nonetheless, we went and spoiled Duncan Ferguson's homecoming party. Everton 0, Villa 1. So apart from the feeling of it's nice to get back on the winning road once more, it was very much, as with a lot of Villa performances over the last few weeks, a game of two halves in terms of the Villa performance. A bit of grit required in that second half, but had more than enough to deal with Everton and quite literally what they had to chuck at us, mainly in terms of long balls into the box. But we dealt with it admirably. Russell, how did you find the game over in slightly sunnier climes than was found on Merseyside on Saturday afternoon?
Obviously, as any villain, loved the W. And what I really liked about it was the different aspect to it. Yeah, we can you can pick a match where you felt, oh, that was easy, or relatively easy. Newcastle at home, even Everton at home, the 3-0. It wasn't a 3-0 match, but there was aspects of that they caved in. It, you felt great. But this was, you used the word gritty. It was resilient. It was ugly. It was horrible, but beautiful. And I loved all those aspects. And particularly, I think if Gerrard spotted in previous videos or even the live match himself there on the touchline a couple of weeks ago against Brentford, we know Villa have had a soft underbelly at times. You can pick any match in a number of matches in the Premier League. I always think back that first season of the Premier League, we were dreadful against Watford away, Southampton away, pick a few last season. And that soft underbelly, if Gerrard's going to get rid of that and turn some of the performances into a really hard, gritty, resilient, ugly W, I'm happy, very happy with everything on Saturday. They very rarely troubled Emmy as well, if you think about it. Emmy and Mings had that between them, got one off the line, which I think Emmy might have got the touch to it, but Mings was there as well. How many other times did Emmy have to pull out a fine save? They had a couple of chances. Didn't DCL stick one over the bar at one stage? That could have changed it if they'd got a goal back. It might have changed the whole crowd into that more, get behind them sort of thing. But it was lovely and tense, but ugly and beautiful.
Now, I mean, in terms of if you're looking for an opponent to grind out a win against, I think Everton was a good pick due to their off-field problems, shall we say. I'm not talking about the throwing of bottles. The protests at full time against the board, the protests before the game against the board. During the game, I think a plane went over in respect of saying some messages about the board and their disapproval. So they huffed and they puffed Everton, but didn't really look like blowing the house down. And I think they are a team. You can tell why they are in the bottom half of the league. But, you know, as you said, Russell, I agree that they occasions previously where we would have buckled in terms of an assault on the goal as it was in the second half. And we did well really to come out of that with a clean sheet and 3 points. We're going to talk about the defensive side of things a bit later. But Connor, firstly, thank you for joining us again. How did you find the game on Saturday? Were you biting your nails on the edge of your seat during the second half, or was it fairly comfortable?
To be honest, I didn't even know that the game was going to be on early hours, so like 12 p.m. Because I was literally out with my theatre company because I do that when I'm not doing footy or anything. And I thought, and my dad said to me, "Oh, did you know the Villa's on?" I said, "Nah, I didn't know they were playing this early." So I missed quite a little bit of the first half, but then when I was in the car going back home, I heard that Villa scored. Obviously, Emmy Brendia scored from a corner, which was absolute beauty from Luca Dean's cross, and such a great header from Emmy. And yeah, it was unbelievable scenes. And obviously, I was quite happy that it's our first win of 2022. Obviously, off to a good start. Because obviously in 2021, it wasn't that good. We was losing quite a few games, and it was a bit of a little concern. But obviously, I think Gerrard's realised that he's made a few different tactics and formations, see what he can do. And then obviously at Everton, I think it was a lot better performance. I said the first half was good, but obviously the second half was a bit intense because I was basically literally on the edge of my seat, just watching on TV. I think, please do not concede. But thankfully, we managed to keep a clean sheet, and the defending and the attacking, they all played together, and all round really.
Yep. Yeah. So, Connor, you mentioned Emmy Buendia there. I'm just going to bring Will in, Mr. Talk of the Trinity himself, to get involved in the action. Emmy Buendia, there was talk, funnily enough, probably instigated by Gerrard at the start of his reign. Well, when Coutinho came in particular, suggesting that they may be fighting for the same place. Whether that was a motivational technique by Gerrard to improve the performance of Buendia, we don't know. But whether it was or not, it seems to be working in terms of another positive performance from Buendia. capped off by a goal, as Russell mentioned. Great set piece in terms of the movement from Buendia. Obviously, one from the training ground in operation. The run was, they left the Everton player who was meant to be marking him for dead. Well placed. I mean, Pickford did touch the ball past his defender. You need a bit of luck kind of in this game. But Buendia, one of the first names on the team sheet for you now, with or without Coutinho, as you two didn't sing?
Definitely, yeah. Emi Buendia, I think we can all agree, has been absolutely fantastic the last month or so. He's had a new lease of life, hasn't he, really, under Gerrard, considering he's playing that 10 role that a lot of Villa fans said he shouldn't be playing on Twitter. We'd have seen the hashtags and the whole Buendia shouldn't be playing behind the striker. He's a right winger. That's where he played for Norwich. That's where he needs to play for Villa. He's coming to that central role. Gerrard's very much said to him and to Coutinho and to anybody else who plays there, get on the ball, show me what you can do, get in between the lines and just go and make something happen. And Buendia is doing that. He's been doing it long before the Brentford game, but that Maradona turn that set up Danny Ings' goal was a piece of genius. The other thing that I think Buendia brings to the game, Steven Gerrard mentioned it the other day, and it's something that Russ has touched upon, is that grit and determination. He's 5'7", football heaven, but he's up there jumping with Yerry Mina, who's 6'84". He's flying into tackles. He's dribbling. You put the ball in the crowd, mate, he's going to dribble around everybody in the seats and come out of the alt end. You know what I mean? You're not losing that ball from his feet. He's been quality, and it's his attitude as well. He just wants to be a team player, the best player there, and over time, I'm sure he will be a number 10 that we rave about, who's done brilliantly over seasons gone by. But he's definitely been quality for us, and he's definitely or one of, if not our star player at the moment, I would say, on form.
Somebody who's far more analytical than me, chap, said Gerrard does favour 2 number 10s narrow, and that's seemingly, you've got them in Coutinho and Emi, you've got them there, and it's working very well, very nice. Only 2 games, 1 and a bit games in for the 2 of them together, but thank you very much. Those 2 performances, the last, Man U and that one, show that grit that Villa have been lacking over most recent years. But
yep. I think in terms of Coutinho on Saturday, the most positive thing you can, it wasn't a terrible performance, but the most positive outcome of it is going to be getting some more match minutes under his belt, going towards match
header. It's a very, very well-directed header, got his head on one in the first half. Oh, yeah, a free kick that went over the bar. But isn't it beautiful? Somebody else said this as well. Isn't it beautiful? You can say, do you know what? The 3rd most expensive player in the world has had a really quiet game for us this weekend, but we won away in a gritty performance. And thank you very much. We'll say, okay, fine. Okay, little Phil, you have your quiet games and we'll wait for you.
I think the thing with Coutinho as well is that he just has this aura about him, doesn't he? Watching that Man United game where we're drawn 2-2, he comes onto the pitch and straight away, he is the best player on that pitch. In my opinion, he's better than Fernandes on his day. Even 75%, he's better than Fernandes. Don't like him. He can bore off. But he's there, and his movement, how he's dropping deep, he's getting into the gaps, he's confident enough to get that ball and run with it. And he gets his goal as well, which was very well deserved. And now he's sort of, even just by stepping onto the pitch, he's asking the players around him to step up their levels to his world-class level, which in his prime, he is a world-class player. And that will only help somebody like Buendia. Buendia has been one of the star players, as I mentioned, over the last couple of months, really, for us. And now he's got Coutinho, who's come in, who's this star player automatically because of the name Philippe Coutinho. Now Buendia has to push himself even more. That's only going to be good for Aston Villa.
You could see against Man U, that first goal against Man U was a complete work of art from Mings coming in, or Beckenbauer or Cancelo, away go through to the fast feet. What you just said exactly about Phil Coutinho. His fast feet made that goal, as well as everybody else's movement. It's just beautiful. That was.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of one of those nice little moments that you get in terms of, you might not think a 12:30 game on a Saturday would have much stats going for it, but you look in terms of the names on both team sheets: Gomez, Yerry Mina, Coutinho, Digne, about 160 million plus, near a 200 million pound worth of Barcelona talent from the last few years, plying their trades for Everton and Villa. I mean, I think that tells a story of its own, but, you know, certainly in terms of our Barcelona players, we are very glad to have them. And I think when Coutinho and Buendia are both on the fully fit on the same wavelength, I think that is a potential, as you mentioned, Russell, with Gerrard's preference for two number 10s narrow. I think that can cause.
Baz, while you mention our feeder club Barcelona there, of note yesterday, Louis Barry scored a fine goal yesterday against Reading under 23. If you get a chance to see that, I haven't seen it yet. It's brilliant. Well, great work from Brad Young, but Louis Barry, another of our little signings from Barcelona.
Yeah, I mean, he may get a chance. We'll touch upon him more in the transfer window second leg special based on some of the outgoings on loan during the transfer window. Will Barry be getting more of a chance in the first team off the bench later on in the season? But stay tuned for that. And if that wasn't a shameless plug for what's to come, I don't know what is. But speaking of shameless plugs, I am going to link it nicely now on to a topic that Mr. Will Forrest wanted to raise in respect of, we touched upon the second half performance, the grit, the determination, the real standing up, well, literally standing up to the bombardment and coming out the other side with a clean sheet. Easy comment to say that credit goes to the defence in respect of that, but you had a few thoughts, Will, in respect of where perhaps some longer term credit for that defensive resolution needs to go, and also in terms of a particular player in that back line that you wanted to give a mention to.
Well, yeah, I mentioned before off camera, but personally for me, I felt it was the first proper defensive display that we had since Dino's Villa team last year. You know, we had 15 clean sheets last season with Emi Martinez. This season, I felt that we've looked susceptible at the back, despite mainly having the same defenders. I think the best that we've done in defence for clean sheets this season is when Cash, Conser, Mings and Target have all been in the back line, funny enough, which was the foundations for us last season. Not to forget the greatest Argentinian goalkeeper of all time in between the sticks for us. It was a bit backs to the wall on Saturday, and you could say that they threw everything at us, the long balls, the kitchen sink, the bottles, everything, and they put their efforts wide. They had them cleared off the line. There were last gasp tackles. Matty Cash won man of the match, and there are a lot of people calling for Tyrone Mings as well to win it. But yeah, for me, I thought it was like last season in regards to a defensive display. But the good thing that we've got now about this defence is we've got those attacking options from the wing back areas. I know it's flat back four, but they're very much wing backs, aren't they? Luca Din and Matty Cash. I mean, Connor will be able to tell you he's a wing back extraordinaire, captain of the Aston Villa Abilities team. And then you've got the creativity of a Mings, as Russ pointed out. Tyrone Mings had a massive hand in both of the goals against Man United, bringing the ball out. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but for some people to say that Tyrone Mings is useless because he made one pass that went out for a corner, which was a sloppy pass, but nothing came of it. It's not the end of the world. My days, Villa Park's not going to fall down around Suarez and Edens just because one pass has gone out for a corner that got wasted. I think Tyrone Mings, for me personally, man of the match on Saturday. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. I think he's one of the best captains that we've seen at Villa Park for his leadership skills, not necessarily his footballing skills all the time. He takes a risk, he does make a mistake. But as I've mentioned on probably every episode, who doesn't make a mistake as a football player? It's just that his get highlighted a lot more. But I thought we were brilliant in defence in the way that we kept the ball out the back of the net. It may not have been, the AC Milan of the late 80s, early 90s, Paolo Maldini, Baresi type of performance. It was bodies on the line, blocking the ball. And who was it blocking the ball on the line? Tyrone Mings.
Well, it takes, I think it takes one Villa captain to determine to talk about another. So I'm going to bring in Connor to give his thoughts on Tyrone Mings and his performance on Saturday and generally. What did you think of Tyrone Mings' performance on Saturday, Connor? Similar to Will in terms of a potential man of the match performance?
To be honest, it was a hard decision. To be honest, he was going to be man of the match, because when I watched Matthew Cash as well with his performance, it was kind of obviously fantastic, because he was making a lot of good interceptions and winning the ball back to the team. And then obviously with Tyrone Mings, it's exactly the same what Will said, really. He kept his body through the line, trying not to concede any goals. Obviously he makes a few silly mistakes, but that's football. Like, if you make mistakes on the pitch, that happens every time, and you just have to basically keep practicing to improve yourself, not to pass silly balls every time to the opposition. But yeah, it's all about basics at the back. There's a lot. You have to use a lot of communication on the pitch throughout the 90 minutes, because if you don't talk to everyone on the pitch, it's not going to work at all, and you will probably concede loads of goals, and all the fans will probably blame on the players and try and say, oh, that's when they're losing games, because it literally can't talk to each other on the pitch. And so as I was saying,
yeah. No, slightly off topic, but being as though we have got you here, Connor, I'll quiz you a little more. Is there anything in terms of Tyrone Mings' leadership that you take into your leadership when you're on the field captaining your team? Is there anything you're influenced by in respect of what Tyrone Mings does?
Just basically just talk a lot on the pitch and just motivate your teammates, and then obviously try and get, if you can, wins and just positive results. And yeah, it's just basically communication, what you can do as a captain. Honestly, it's a great honour to be a captain anyway, because it's a very number one job and footy. So yeah, it's just all about great leadership skills to have, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, I think leadership is one of the things that is definitely in the tick box for Tyrone Mings, and you notice it when he's not there. In terms of your point, Will, as regards throwbacks to Dean Smith's defence, when I would say my view is one of the reasons why, well, he ended up being dismissed, apart from that we kept losing games, was, as you mentioned, because the defence, was going back to the bad old days of most of the first season when we were back in the Premier League and prior to lockdown, of just not being able to keep a clean sheet, leaving the opposition too much space, too many shots on our goal. And, numbers fans will tell you the more shots that you face, the more goals you're likely to concede, unless you got De Gea in goal. And then it might be a different story. But the story of Villa staying up, in my view, in that first season was we tightened up that defence, and especially near the end of the season, where we come into the Premier League with the aim of we're going to carry on playing our attacking football. And if we're a bit loose at the back, then so be it. By the end of that first season, the primary aim was we're going to keep a clean sheet. And then if we can hit somebody on the break and get a goal, then obviously that's great, because we needed some wins. But we're going for the 0 in the goals conceded column first. And the second season, we started well and kept some clean sheets. It was kind of COVID, really, when it went through the squads, December, January. Really ruined our season, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, and things became a bit trickier in the second half of the season. And John Terry leaving in the summer, I think, had a we suspected it may have an impact. I think it's safe to say it had a massive impact in terms of that defensive solidarity. But it was one of the things we've touched upon before since Gerrard's come in. It's one of the things easy to identify in terms of needing to tighten up. And as you said, the defence was mainly one that Dean Smith built in terms of personnel, except Luca Digne has obviously come in and he wasn't really brought in for his defensive ability, as demonstrated really on Saturday when he's up the other end with his first assist for Villa. You know, we're getting into, you know, those positions, getting balls into the box. So, I mean, obviously we want him to be able to defend, but I think at the other end of the pitch is where we're going to be seeing him hopefully add more into our goal scored column. So I think he's had the ingredients there. I think, you know, it'd be churlish to say that Dean Smith deserves none of the credit because, you know, he built that defence, as I said, apart from Digne. But I think it's in terms of this season, we were losing our way a bit tactically, I think, under Dean Smith. I think that the bad old days, we weren't being tight enough in the midfield. We were letting too much pressure onto us, and that's why we're conceding too many. I think Gerrard has come in and he's made some noticeable steps to rectify that. So I'd say in terms of, I suppose it's like when you go to a museum and you see like different pieces from certain ages, you know, of history all in an exhibit. And it's like, yeah, that's how I see this defence in terms of, yeah, they're pieces that were brought together by Dean Smith, but they've been put together in Steven Gerrard's new Claret and Blue revolution in a different way to what they were before. And I think in terms of what he's doing at the other end of the pitch as well, is going to lead to famous last words, us tightening up the defence as demonstrated on Saturday, and us having a bit more threat up front, you know, in terms of we've got the number 10s we mentioned earlier, and, you know, we'll leave the issue of who's playing up front for another time perhaps. But though, Russell, is that me being a bit harsh on Dean Smith, giving Gerrard too much credit?
No, because I want to give Dino massive credit, and he was lucky with the lockdown. What he did during that, this is well chronicled, what he did was analyse the two teams that had conceded the least, Man City, Liverpool, and he went through all the videos, then had one-to-one interviews with every player, got their views, fed it all back in a group scenario, and after we came back from the lockdown, through to, as you say, before December, January, when we went a bit pear-shaped with injuries and COVID at Villa. The defence was outstanding, so you've got to give Dean massive credit for that. But I've banged on about this for a long time. I love them to bits, as in I'll say thank you very much and wave them a grateful goodbye. But Trez and El Ghazi were not the players to hold the ball up. Too often they were giving the ball away, so the pressure came back on us immediately. And that's where, in Dino's reign, we fell apart. Now, we haven't got Trez. I wouldn't expect to see much of Trez for the rest of this campaign, even if he comes back fully fit. And we certainly haven't got El Ghazi anymore for the rest of this season. And we'll say thank you very much, goodbye in the summer, I'm sure. But now got players who are playing wide or as number 10s that are keeping hold of the ball. And so there's an element of Gerrard, and still huge credit to Dino as well, but in my mind.
Yeah, there's certainly an expectation of, how can I put this, more of a work ethic from our midfield now than there was.
And an additional point, Baz, that Gerrard has actually got the likes of JJ or McGinn, left or right, that if Luca Digne goes, doing his strength, which is way up, attacking fullback, then they are covering and they are coming in as a quasi, a secondary fullback to cover, and that's there as well. I didn't see so much of that under Dino, so again, credit Gerrard for that, for the element of those. Matty Cash and Target were both good defenders in a way. I think they both lack a bit in the crossing. Well, Target it'll be a good backup, but I don't think we'll see much of him as long as Luca Digne's staying fit. if Luca Dean can play 38 matches next season, I'll have him all day, every day.
Yeah, you'd think that is his place to lose in the team, Dina, and that Target may have to get used to the role of backup in the Villa squad moving forwards in that left back position. But I'm glad you mentioned John McGinn, just so I can give him a plug. I think he set the tone on Saturday, getting involved. I mean, it was, I think the first half, well, especially the first half of the first half, summed up why a lot of fans love the Premier League, but why on a national level, the England team is historically not that good, because the ball was kind of, it was almost like a tennis match at occasion, kind of frantically going from one side to the other. Nobody, especially Everton, weren't able to keep the ball for longer than 2 passes before losing possession, and there's a real kind of intensity to go and get the ball back. But you can see why, as a national side, we get passed around by people who can keep the ball, or we did before Southgate, kind of in the last few years, instilled more of a passing and kind of keeping the ball in the England team, because you got to be able to hold the ball international level. So good for the entertainment. Kind of not good in terms of technical level, perhaps, in the first half, but McGinn got stuck in. But speaking of somebody who was demonstrating good technical ability and somebody who's increasingly becoming a mainstay of the first team, and we mentioned in Dean Smith and credit, I think Dean Smith deserves a lot of credit for who we're going to talk about next, for bringing him in to the squad with, belief, giving him some games, kind of not some of the young players we've seen have gone out on loan to go and get experience. Didn't happen with this player. And, I think Gerrard's going to get a lot of the credit, kind of in terms of, oh, he's an attacking midfielder, this person's attacking midfielder, therefore he's got much better. But yeah, I think Gerrard is the lucky recipient of the work Dean Smith did in bringing Jacob Ramsey into this Villa team. And you're talking about players who just places in the team is not guaranteed, but it's theirs to lose. I'd say Ramsey's approaching that status now, because his performances over the last few weeks in particular, maybe you could say not quite for the full 90 minutes, but the second half against Man United, he was arguably the best player on the pitch. And again against Everton, I thought he had a really good game in terms of getting the team going, possession, showing the ability to go forwards, and a local hero, which the fans love, and hero maybe a bit much at this stage, but the lazy comparisons maybe would be to Jack Grealish in terms of a young midfielder coming through. My view is comparing apples with pears, but they're two very exciting players coming through. I mean, Will's looking there to see what an apple or a pear is, answers on a postcard. But yeah, I think in terms of, you can't compare the two. They're two different players. We've talked about Grealish previously. He's in a category of his own. But very excited about the JJ train. We'll bring Will in for his thoughts. What are your thoughts about JJ? I know you've been canvassing the views of the Villa faithful on @ Trinity for some of their views on Jacob Ramsey.
Jacob Ramsey has been an absolute baller this season, hasn't he? Come on, let's be honest. I mean, he's the most exciting thing to come out of that Villa academy since Jack Grealish. And it's amazing that we've had these two talents come through so close to each other when, we were famed to have an amazing academy, but there was a very long time that we had quite a bit of dross come through, really. Nothing that you felt was going to make the first team. Jacob Ramsey, when he first came in, wasn't 100% convinced. However, he plays for the team. He's got a claret and blue shirt on. You give him your support 110%. He managed to get in and kick Conor Hourihane out of the team on his debut against Wolves away in a fine 1-0 victory. And he did well last season. He was getting in ahead of Ross Barkley in the end, whether that's because Dino had more faith in him or whether it was because he knew he wasn't going to keep Barkley. So he thought, let's see what JJ can do. Whatever the reason, it's worked out well for us. He's been great this season. You know, he got back into the team after starting on the bench against Watford. I think we mentioned he was a catalyst in that performance for helping us get back into that game, even though we didn't win it in the end. And he's just gone from one level to the next very quickly this season. Getting on the ball, he's become a lot more physical in his approach. He's not adverse to a bit of shithousery as well, you know, which is nice to see. Very good passer, gets forward, he takes a chance, you know. He's still got things to develop, obviously, but you'd hope that he's going to be a very, very big player for us going forward for the next 7-8 years, if not longer, because if we're producing players like him, which is what Christian Purslow wants, and we're also able to spend money on the likes of your Philippe Coutinho's and whomever else, then why shouldn't we be challenging up the top end and keeping hold of these players? For me, at the moment, Jacob Ramsey, his best performance was that second half against Man United. You hit the nail on the head. First half, he did nothing, did he really? He was lucky not to get hooked at half time. I think Gerrard put a rocket up his arse and he kicked on from there. I've asked the question to people on Twitter, and it'd be great to get it'd be all right to get your view, Baz, but it'd be great to get Russ and Connor's view in regards to Connor. Is Jacob Ramsey a future Villa captain, or is he not the right type of player? What do you reckon?
Obviously,
the answer's yes.
I don't know about a future Villa captain yet. Probably in a few years' time, but definitely not yet. But he's definitely another great academy player at the Villa, 100%. I used to remember when he played his debut at Wolves. I could always watching that on TV, and I thought to myself, what a young talent. He just loves to try and get the ball back for the team, loves taking players on, as what Jack's done at Villa. You know, he wants to try his best to become a better player, because he did say in his recent interview saying about he wants to be like Gerrard in the future, be one of the greatest players ever in the league. And rightly so, and you never know, he could be a future England player as well. And I can definitely see that happening in a few years' time if he keep having good performances on the pitch. Yeah.
His goal is to get into the England squad before the end of this calendar year, apparently. But the one thing is, you mentioned that then, I can't help but think the one thing that I was really impressed with him, and it's going to sound really daft, he scored his first goal at Villa Park in front of the Hull in that 2-1 defeat to make it 2-1 against Man United when we came back and drew 2-2. How many players would have ran off and jumped into the crowd and celebrated and whatnot? What a very intelligent young man to go and get the ball out the back of the net, to go and put it back onto the centre circle and to say, come on, we've got momentum now. Let's get back into this. He's a fantastic lad, and hopefully he graces our presence at Villa Park for many, many years to come.
Yep, no. Will made it clear that my opinion was only okay, Russell. So I'll pass to yours in terms of what your thoughts are on Ramsey and whether you see him as a future Villa captain.
I'd agree with just about every word that Will had ran through about JJ there. And to my mind, what underpins it, and that Man United game is a classic example, his willingness to learn, because he didn't look 100% the type of player for us at the start, but he's obviously been learning. And I said to someone watching the Man United match in the pub at half time, JJ's not at the races today. And Gerrard has said that he gave the whole team a bollocking at half time. And JJ must have taken on board what was said, because the second half is a different player. And thank you very much, JJ. Yeah, that was simply outstanding. It's a bit academic to draw comparisons to the likes of outstanding midfield, Phil Foden, Jude Bellingham. I know Blue, but two outstanding players who have developed at perhaps a younger age or a faster pace in different scenarios. They are outstanding midfielders, but JJ, learn at your own, go at your own pace, mate. And England have so many matches between now and the World Cup, with the Euro Nations matches. A couple of friendlies were lined up, Switzerland and Ivory Coast in March. we've got so many matches to play before then, probably a few other friendlies, that with a few injuries, I could see him getting called up to the squad if he carries on this upward trend that he's been for the last couple of months, and especially under Gerrard. He's willing to learn, young, and he's loving it, and we're loving him.
I mean, I think in terms of my view, for whoever's interested in terms of Ramsey, is you mentioned, Will, that maybe a few years ago that the quality of players coming through the academy wasn't particularly strong, or as strong as it has been historically compared to other eras. And, you know, there's probably a number of players you could rattle off who made, you know, one appearance off the bench or made one start or a couple, you know, kind of not really making much of an impact on the Villa first team squad, let alone the starting 11. And just kind of the feeling of when we needed a body, you know, we'll get somebody in. We'll see what they're like. We're not hugely convinced on them. And you can generally tell in terms of, you know, Russell, you mentioned Jude Bellingham. If you've got young players and they go off somewhere else, you can generally roughly tell kind of their ability level based on where they go. I mean, it does happen in terms of a player gets let go at a young age and works their way back up to the top. I mean, it does happen, so you can't say it never does. But the players kind of at the first half and probably beyond of this decade of Villa youth team players who were leaving to go to other clubs, very few of them came back in terms of up the league into the Premiership. I mean, I think the best you could say, a few found a home in the Championship. You know, I think you have, you know, I'm thinking of Callum Robinson, for example. I mean, technically he did play in the Premier League, but as Will would say, it's for West Brom, so it doesn't count. But, you know, in terms of Daniel Johnson as well, I remember he went to Preston for a bag of crisps, which was, you know, ridiculous money to be sold. But that was kind of the level, really, in terms of the best academy players that we were getting. And mentioned Bellingham, he's off to Borussia Dortmund. None of our young players were going off to Borussia Dortmund 5 years ago. And Ramsey, you know, he would, in terms of that conveyor belt 5 years ago, just would have got into the team by default. He's not in the team by default now. You know, in terms of there's a real competition for places in terms of that midfield. And we've had kind of discussions off air in terms of whether, you know, whether Morgan Sanson, for example, does he walk into the well, not walk into the starting 11, does he deserve a place in the starting 11 because he had a decent kind of 50 minutes against Man United? I mean my simple answer to that is you got Ramsey, you got, you know, we talked about Buendia, you got Coutinho now coming, McGinn, you know, Douglas Luiz. Somebody of the quality of Sanson doesn't get into our team, and in order to keep Sanson out of the team, you got to be a decent player. I mean, you can make an argument about how good Sanson is, but one of the reasons why Sanson does not get in our team, in my view, is because of Ramsey. And because Ramsey is just, as you said, Russell, he's learning, he's improving, he's taking things on board. You think that process is only going to accelerate under Gerrard. As you said, we've all said he's been there, done that. Who better to learn from if you want to be an action midfielder than Gerrard? And
also, I draw the analogy with Man City and Foden. I'm pretty sure Pep didn't want him to go out on loan. He wanted him to learn as a youth player in the academy from all the excellent, the outstanding, you know, talent you've got in any given Moneybags Man City Petrodollars FC squad. And he must have done that. And if Ramsey's carrying on learning with the likes of, you know, playing around Coutinho and everybody else, Buendia, fantastic. All for it.
Yep. And I think in terms of your question, Will, could he be a future Villa captain? I think in terms of if he's still at Villa in a few years, he's earned his place in that midfield, and you'd expect he's only got better from now. I mean, he's got better in this half season, never mind what he's going to be in a couple of years. And if he's anything like Gerrard, I mean, his leadership style, I see them, you know, in terms of his, we've talked about Tyrone Mings in terms of his leadership style. His is very, you know, when Tyrone Mings is on the pitch, let's put it that way, especially if you're playing next to him centre back. There's different types of leaders. Some can lead through example. Gerrard probably fell into that category. He wasn't necessarily the one for the big speech, but people followed him because, by God, he was a good player. I see Ramsey being that type of captain if he does become captain. Not necessarily the one shouting, raving, kind of everyone, but just, grabbing a game by the scruff of its neck and inspiring people to follow him through actions rather than words. And in terms of if you're going to pick, centre back, centre midfield, I think are the best two places for your captain to play because they're literally in the centre of things. So I see if Ramsey carries on at the pace he does in terms of development and he's still there in a few years, I don't see any reason why he can't be in terms of captain. I mean, I'm not going to say, oh, what an outrageous suggestion. And if he is still at Villa in a few years, I think he is a very, very good player and Villa are a very, very good team. So, in all aspects, regardless of whether he's captain or not, I hope he's still in the first 11 or squad, depending on what happens in the transfer window for a long time to come. And it's good in terms of having those success stories come through the academy. And in terms of we've been buying players at a young age to come into the academy, they're still homegrown because you've still put the finishing touch to those players if you're bringing them in when they're 16, 17, that we have been doing. But Ramsey coming through from a young age, that adds, it's always an extra level, in terms of that hometown connection when somebody's been there for a long time.
Shout out for his brother. Well, he's got two brothers, but Aaron, who we've seen in the academy side, the under-23 side, apparently a very fine player. Lots to learn and develop as well. But when both in the team.
Yeah, I mean, when we think that Jacob Ramsey is close to potentially being captain, we'll hit him up with Connor, and Connor can give him some tips as regards how to be the best captain that he can be. In terms of before he's ready, he's got to go through the Connor management leadership school before then.
Exactly,
so really that's my answer. He needs to talk to Connor before we can even consider him being captain. But he gets my vote as and when that situation arises. So I think we've really gone through some of the positive points of Saturday. I only have my agenda hastily prepared for me before the show has Ollie Watkins on there. I'll pass you to my co-host Will to illuminate on the comments regarding Ollie Watkins, because I don't really have too much to say in terms of Watkins currently. I mean, in terms of Saturday, it was, there was a debate amongst Villa fans as to whether he would play with Danny Ings or Danny Ings kind of them playing together, two up front, or Danny Ings in the number 10 role. Kind of, we played it against Man United. Didn't really work particularly. So Saturday, Watkins gets the vote up front on his own. Ings came off the bench in the second half. I don't think Saturday's performance from Watkins really settled the debate one way or another, if I'm being honest. I mean, he played all right. I mean, I think in terms of hold-up play was okay. I think he's had better games up front on his own for Villa, but it wasn't a performance where I'm thinking, and this may be where Will comes in gearing up the bandwagon. It wasn't a performance from Watkins which made me think, oh, we've got to get Danny Ings back in the team. I mean, I think in terms of, it was solid. I see you're itching to go, Will. What are your thoughts in relation to the ongoing Ings-Watkins saga?
To be honest with you, I'm itching because of fleas, but I just add, in regards to captains, right backs also make quality captains. Ollie Watkins, it was really that, Baz, to be honest, what you touched upon. Interesting to get the views of all of you, including you as well. As to Watkins, did he do enough to keep his place in the team for the next game that we've got? There's been talk that, I've seen talk on Facebook, and it's maybe we should rotate them. We should play Ings against certain teams, Watkins against other teams, or we should do 70 minutes, 20 minutes. Why don't we just put their names into a hat and get Stephen to pick them out of a boot beforehand and then decide who starts then? And every now and again, throw in a curveball like Brad Young. Oh, someone else is starting up front instead. I don't agree with the idea of you do deliberate game time for people unless it's development level kids football. You know, you've got to go with your strongest team. When you look at the next matches that we've got coming up, and you know, we've got some very winnable matches coming up, haven't we? Really, the next 5 games being Leeds at home, Newcastle away, Watford at home, who have literally just appointed Hodgson as their new manager, Brighton away and Southampton at home. You feel that we can win all of those, or at least I do. I think that we could win every single one of them. We shouldn't be losing any of them at all. Please accept my apologies for the curse that I've just placed upon the Claret and Blue Army. With that being the case, did Ollie Watkins do enough on Saturday when his position is one that is under threat? And I think it's fair that we say that, given performances this season from both him and Danny Ings, they haven't been setting the house on fire. Has Watkins done enough to start against Leeds? For me, against those sort of teams, I want a predator in the box, somebody who knows where the back of the net is, especially when you've got 2 number 10s in Buendia and Coutinho and those overlapping wing backs. I want Danny Ings up front. I'm going back to him, especially after that last podcast where you tricked me into picking Ollie Watkins up front. I blame Liam. Don't invite him back for the next one.
So bad news for you about that we'll reveal at the end of the show.
I would have Danny Ings up front for the next game. Give him a chance, something a bit different against the Leeds team who are leaky. I mean, they lost to Newcastle at the weekend. You can cut them open. Maybe that's the sort of game that Ollie Watkins runs at them. Though for me, I want to get goals, especially against a goalkeeper who's low on confidence at the moment. Russ, Con, Baz, what are you saying? Would you stick with Watkins at the moment, or would you?
I'm going to put my hand up and stick with Watkins.
He's at the shop.
I admit Ings does track back and do a lot of pressing very well. And we all stood back last season in admiration at Ollie Watkins, the goals he was scoring, and his pressing and everything else, and his energy levels. But there was one thing I kept on saying about Ollie last season, which I didn't want to, it wasn't a direct criticism. It was just something that I was looking forward to this season. And that comment about Ollie last season was his shot conversion was not good enough. It needed to be better. And I was cutting him some slack because it's his first season in the Premier League. And I was saying to anybody listening to me and rattling on, he's going to get 20 goals next season because he's going to step up, improve that shot conversion. Now, he hasn't done that this season for whatever reason. The mixed formations, the playing with Ings, playing with Ings is not working. For whatever reason, he hasn't put... And there was one example on Saturday you'd have expected. I think Ings would have got that one chance that Ollie missed on Saturday. So I understand your argument fully. I think it's my love from Ollie last season just overlapping, saying, oh, okay, Ollie, go. We know Leeds are going to run all day. They're under Bielsa. We need you running all day as well, Ollie, which he can do. And that's why I probably go with it. But I take both arguments and I'm happy. Either way, I'll be cheering them on. Although I'm going to miss that match because I've got a conference to attend. So it's the first match I've missed for Donkers.
It's interesting you mentioned that conversion rate because I saw something the other day, and it isn't to get down on Watkins. I'm a very big Watkins fan. I just feel that Ings is better suited when you've got the supply line that you have. You want to use the best gun to fire the bullets that you're being given. You know, something that I saw was in the last, I think it was 6 or so matches, he has had as many shots on target as Michail Antonio has. And Michail Antonio was only being on the pitch for half the amount of time that Ollie Watkins has. He's very much an Andy Cole striker. They used to say, didn't they, Andy Cole takes 5 shots to score a goal. Con, are you team Watkins, or are you coming back onto the show because you picked Danny Ings?
Obviously, I agree with you things what Russell was saying about obviously Watkins. Obviously, in his first season, he was absolutely fantastic. He scored about 18 or 19 goals, which is fantastic. But yeah, I think for some reason this season, I don't know why he's not clicking a lot. For some reason, he's not the same how he was from last season, and that's a little bit of a concern. Obviously, his pressing is still good for going forward, but when he gets that close to the final third, suddenly he loses it and doesn't track back to get the ball. And I think with Danny Ings, like, a bit hot and cold for me at the minute still. I think it's still kind of like settling in the Villa team at the minute with the formation. But I'm hoping with his hopefully performances coming up, he should do a lot better, because obviously we did buy him for 30 million, which was quite a lot of money for him. And really, for that money, he should be scoring a lot of goals worth that. And at the minute, that's not clicking either. So I am a little bit concerned with the strikers. I feel like we need one more extra striker in the January transfer window. Because obviously I did hear rumours about Luis Suarez in the summer, but I don't think that won't happen in my opinion. But yeah, that's my thoughts really. And I think, I don't know, probably try and start Ings this time. I want to see how he gets on in the next game at least. He needs to prove himself, because if he doesn't prove it, he might be back to Watkins again. So yeah, I'll say Ings for this next game. Give him the go.
1-1.
Well, there we go. We've got, well, actually we've got two for Ings, one for Watkins, and so that, you know, it leaves almost a deciding vote to me to see if this goes to deadlock. And
You won't be invited back with the wrong choice either.
I mean, to be honest, I've been trying to get myself disinvited off the show for about 6 months. So if I knew it was that easy, well, you know, I might have had the opinion a lot earlier. And my overall view, it does fit in with a point Connor raised, which I totally agree with, which is at the moment, you know, we're having a debate about Watkins or Ings because, well, they're the only two kind of what you call first choice strikers at the club. And in terms of that specific question, who do you play out of those two? I do think in the system Gerrard wants to play, I do think Watkins is the better fit than Ings in this system. But in terms of who do I think is going to be playing up front next season, if Gerrard has his way, what I anticipate his ways in terms of players he wants to bring in, I don't think either of them are. I think, as Connor says, I think another striker is coming in to play up front, you know, in terms of, they both have elements that I think Gerrard wants in terms of who he wants playing in that kind of one up front, if you call it that way. If you can meld them both together, you would have the ultimate Gerrard striker. And, you know, I think we touched eloquently upon, you know, what Watkins brings, what Danny Ings brings in terms of their respective roles. Unfortunately, watching the way Gerrard wants to play, I don't think either of them quite fit. So in terms of currently for the rest of this, you know, maybe not for the rest of the season, I do see a point in terms of, we've touched upon performance on the pitch, and you know, ultimately, if you're playing up front and you know your goal scoring touch continues to desert you, then there's going to be, you know, pressure for whoever's not starting. The other ones come in, and you couldn't really have too many complaints about that. But in terms of longer term for Villa, I don't think either of them are going to be up front if Gerrard, you know, gets his Rolodex of strikers out. I mean, mentioned Luis Suarez, he's been linked. I mean, he's well, just because of age alone, he's not long term. I mean, if you think in terms of he coming, you know, for the experience, you know, I mean, players are going to be chomping at the bits to learn off Luis Suarez. If you get the reference there, don't call my lawyers. But yeah, it's, yes, a squad player, you can't argue, you know, in terms of that experience. But yeah, I do think in the summer we're going to be looking for another striker. I mean, ideally, I agree, Connor, if we can find somebody in January, get them in. But you know, kind of the teams in the league are looking for a striker. So you know, we're not unique. So we may need to wait to the summer to get the big signing. I think up front, which is, you know, we had a big signing, Danny Ings, last summer. You know, but it's kind of talked about Dean Smith. The new manager has come in, doesn't quite fit. And I think in terms of it's easy, if you've got a tactic, it's easier sometimes to get a player to come in to play your tactic than it is to, you know, try and shoehorn a player who doesn't quite fit into it. So I mean, hopefully they both get a run of games during the course of the rest of the season and both get some goals, get some confidence up. I mean, I agree with Will that I don't think there's much merit just in manually rotating them just for the sake of it. I mean, you get consistency in terms of, I agree, consistency of selection is important, especially if you're trying to build a team, build a culture, in terms of, especially if you're integrating Digne, you're integrating Coutinho into the team, you want to try and get, the players used to each other. So no, I agree with Will in the sense of find one and stick to it. But we are perfectly split in terms of who that was.
Can I just add that I totally agree with what Connor said and what you're backing up there, Baz. And I said the same thing to my eldest son last night. If Aston Villa have aspirations to finish in the top 6 or be knocking on the door of the top 4, we want somebody to score 20 goals a season. Read Peter With, but we haven't had anybody since Peter With. Some players have come close, if you ignore Tammy Abraham. But in the top level, we need a 20. We need an Aguero type, someone. It could be Suarez for just a season, and then we might see what happens after that. But whatever happens, for us to be knocking on the door of the upper echelons of the Premier League, we have got to have a 20-goal a season striker. If it's not Ings or Watkins, I'm with you both. Let's get somebody else in. Yeah.
But I think it's easier said than done to find your 20-goal as a season striker. I would say we get the wish list to Santa, but we might miss the sleigh.
Jermaine Defoe.
Is he an agent? Is he an agent now? Does he know some younger players that he might be able to persuade to?
Dwight York's still looking for work, so we know that.
Leon Bailey's going to be played up front before the end of the season. He'll get at least one run out up front before the end of the season, providing he recovers from injury, or Traore will. One of them two.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think Traore further up the pitch against Brentford. I think match fitness was a concern there. But yeah, I mean, I can see in terms of a few of our, what you may call traditional wider players coming in terms of seeing if they can contribute up front. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But, well, speaking of contributions, that does bring us to the end of this episode of Talk of the Trinity, and thanking the contributions from our special guest stars, Mr. Aston Villa, Connor Sherry, and Russell of the Cayman Islands. Pleasure, as always, to have you on. And if you're thinking we need some more guests, we need to really get that canvas of Villa opinion far and wide, then you are in luck, because plans are currently being hatched at a super secret location for the dream team of the transfer window part 1 special, which was released at the end of December, to reassemble like a terrible Marvel film for the transfer window special part 2, which we are hoping will come out during the course of next week as of time of recording, so first week of February, conveniently after the transfer window is shut, hopefully. So we are going to reminisce in terms of our picks to see who was right, who was wrong, who deserves credit, who deserves to be laughed at, and also evaluating where the Villa team is now as compared to where it was on January the 1st, and thoughts for the rest of the season. So check us out for that. We'll be more than happy to welcome you all along for the ride. But in the meantime, check us out on our YouTube page at Talk Trinity, on our Twitter channel at Talk Trinity, where no doubt we will be canvassing Villa opinion with polls and comments far and wide for your delectation. And we ain't got a game for a couple of weeks, so there's plenty to get involved in the meantime. If you prefer the audio version of the podcast, check us out on our podcast providers: Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, some other ones that will no doubt correct me on during his roundup. Also check out some of our historical interviews as well. We've got ones with Jamie Gray. We've got international villains giving their views on all things Villa and how they got into supporting Villa. So you got some time to kill. Go and inform your Villa knowledge with some of our historic podcasts and videos. But whilst I go off and do that, I will pass you over to Mr. Talking to Trinity himself, Will Forrest, for his final thoughts. So I would just say, from my perspective, thanks for listening, for supporting the channel, much appreciated, and I'll be back with you again soon.
Yeah, just to say once again, cheers, Tar. Thank you very much to Russell and his absolutely phenomenal shirt, mate. I love it. I want a shirt like that for Christmas. Actually, I'm going to take a screenshot and show Vicky. Thank you to Connor for coming on. We're going to get Con on for a proper chat at some point about his Villa career so far, which will be a must see and a must listen to. That being said, we've got some other must see and must listen to podcast episodes. We've got our chat with Russell previously, with Dave Martinez Dance Dave, with Liam from the Qatar Lions. You mentioned Jamie Gray. That's a very good point. So, yeah, Jamie, yeah, if your dad could be free on the 9th of February, we could do with him up front. Nice one. Yeah, let me know. All right. Anyway, that's conversation. That's obviously off air. That's private. Thank you for listening. Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. Up the Villa.